Sio Nagad. Hello all. Osha afternoon. Good afternoon and Wado. Thank you for watching. So this is day 4, day Nuk in Cherokee of Transformation of America, the True Life Story of a CIA Mind Control Slave by Kathy O'Brien with Mark Phillips. I'll try and keep it under 10 minutes, and I'm going to try and speak a little faster so I can get a little further. As a child, my attention span was regarded as abnormal. I was considered very bright, yet my grades in school reflected something different. Although not properly diagnosed, I was most likely suffering from what is now termed attention deficit disorder, ADD. The handicaps of stuttering and ADD were to become my first personal improvement challenges once I was out in the world on my own. This on my own objective came at an early age. I was barely 16 years old when I left home to begin my pursuit of happiness. My first efforts resulted in total failure. However, I could not return to my parents' home because they were now divorced. Young, broken, rejected, I was able to determine 2 things. I must learn how to communicate if I was to enjoy any success in life. I went about this task methodically. First, by enrolling myself in a local night college. In the classroom, I studied speech, business law, and psychology. At the library, I studied brain functions and their effect on the mind. I was not degree-oriented because I could not earn enough at 2 jobs to attend the required classes to graduate, but my studies were slowly providing me a useful skill. Somewhere during this period of learning, I began to realize I possessed a natural ability to sell. Perhaps this ability to persuade others resulted from my childhood experiencing of having to read people through their body language rather than talking with them. My first real job in sales was so successful that my client base was reduced by my employer. I responded to this action by moving on. The Vietnam War was heating up and I was eligible for the draft. No longer in school, I knew that my number would be drawn soon, and it was. Little did I know that my prayers for a deferment would be answered and would afford me an exemption from military duty. I would soon be working for the Ampex Corporation and then with the U.S. Department of Defense in a civilian capacity. The defense work closely associated me with top research scientists working in the area of primate and human behavior modification. Ironically, I learned more about the mind from my casual relationships with these scientists than I did working at the various research sites. The sites included teaching hospitals, state mental institutions, military bases, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA facilities, and the Yerkes Primate Center. The following years of my corporate employment in national and international sales evolved into sales and marketing management positions in an executive capacity. My personal life, in terms of loving relationships, was again in shambles, but my career in ongoing mind, brain, human behavior research was rewarding enough to compensate for my lack of emotional expression. The secrets I had learned so well concerning powers of persuasion, both conscious and subliminal, had long since become a functioning part of my mind's arsenal of defensive and offensive tools of control. I resolved then and there not to become a control freak. Instead, my fantasy was not to learn what I could control, but what was controlling me. Then around 1986, a peer friend of mine observed that I had arrived in the proverbial comfort zone in terms of presenting profitable ideas for others to act upon, and advised me to go into business for myself. Shortly thereafter, he provided me an excellent example by resigning his 6-figure executive marketing directorship and nominating me as a candidate for his replacement. Ironically, for the first time in my life, a nomination was rejected because I did not possess at least a master's degree in business management or communications. His assistant was given the position, and I was subsequently offered the assistant's vacated position with no hope of promotion, which of course I refused. Soon thereafter, my friend, free of his corporate golden handcuffs, established his own firm, which became a very successful business. Around this same time, a childhood acquaintance, long since socially separated from my life, reappeared long enough to introduce me to his country music entertainment friend, Alex Houston. From this introduction, I learned this acquaintance, Ray Myers, and his wife, Regina, are alleged pedophiles who reportedly sexually molested Kathy's daughter and their own children. It seemed that Houston was looking for someone with international business negotiating skills who could assist him in putting together a large enough sales deal to finance a manufacturing operation. After spending a few days of complimentary consulting time with him, I had made some rather interesting and intriguing observations about the man and his ideas. First of all, Houston did have a legitimate, potentially profitable idea concerning the manufacture of an electric capacitor device that could increase energy efficiency for large industrial consumers. Secondly, Houston favorably impressed me as a calculated risk taker. Thirdly, Houston agreed to finance my production of a marketing plan for presentation to potential foreign buyers. And finally, Houston agreed that I would run the company as president if and when I sold that plan. I thought, no problem. The intriguing part of this budding relationship was my awareness of Houston's propensity for dishonesty. I felt an urgent need for legal advice on how to ensure contractual protection from Houston. Within days, Houston and I had conceptually and contractually agreed to start up the business. I designed a logo and assigned the name Uniphase. The contracts we entered bound both of us to our respective areas of commitment and was ironclad. Houston's willingness to participate in my legal protection maneuver further perplexed me because of the obvious honesty type clauses contained in the agreement. At the time, in my mind, I had determined that if Houston could keep it clean and perform his role, we would be able to make this company successful. If not, I owned the company lock, stock, and barrel and could still make it work. Months later, with business and marketing plans in my briefcase and a demonstration model of the proposed product in hand, Houston and I boarded a plane to Hong Kong. We were met upon arrival by a tall, well-dressed Korean gentleman who introduced himself as William Yoon. He owned an international shipping company. His ships carried practically everything from scrap metal to Chinese silkworm missiles all over the world. Mr. Yoon, and as he preferred to be called, is keeping with Far Eastern protocol, was interested in negotiating a joint venture company with his friends in the most populated nation on earth, the People's Republic of China. All arrangements had to be made by Mr. Yoon's staff for Houston, myself, and him to be flying to Beijing the following day to begin negotiations with the mining ministry. Makes me think. I heard something about them before. After several days of exhausting discussions through an interpreter almost entirely between myself and the deputy director of Chinese mining industry, it appeared as though we had a workable deal. An elegant banquet was ordered by our gracious Chinese host, and it was there that I learned that the mining ministry was a part of the Chinese Ministry of Defense. Feelings of patriotism welled up in me for the first time in my life. I was aware that China was engaged in supplying missiles to Libya and Middle Eastern country with whom the U.S. was in conflict. The Chinese were swapping missiles and other weapons for the cheap Libyan light crude oil. The Chinese were about the only country in the world who dared defy the Reagan administration's trade embargo. These fleeting thoughts of being involved with the Chinese military felt treasonous to me. Although uncomfortable with the idea of a business venture with such potential for political disaster, I reminded myself that hundreds of other U.S. companies were already in China. Houston refused to discuss the subject. During the return flight from Beijing to Hong Kong, I confided my patriotic concerns to Mr. Yoon. Knowing that he would soon become my business partner, he eloquently relieved my fears of potential disaster with a complicated explanation that made sense at the time. This man politely informed me that we could not lose money, as he and I would have interim control over all product sales revenue generated outside of China. By Chinese law for joint venture companies, 60% of all manufactured product must go outside of China. Houston and I returned to Tennessee, and I briefly met his wife, Kathy, for the first time. When she greeted us at the gate, she appeared to be young, beautiful, very dumb, and dressed like a prostitute. I paced my walk to be several steps away from her as we headed to the baggage claim area. Within a few weeks of this visit, a delegation of Chinese electrical engineers and finance experts were flown to our Tennessee office for more negotiations and to collect technical production data we held for future manufacturing purposes. Soon after the delegation departed for China, I received a mysterious phone call from one of the U.S. Department of State, aka the State Department. It seems someone in my Chinese delegation had earlier been refused entry into the country due to their being identified as an international weapons supplier for terrorists. The telephone voice assured me that there were no problems that would arise and that this information was not to be publicized. I thanked him and assured him the information was secure. All right, it's gonna get pretty, bad from here on out, I would think. So if anything triggers you, I think you need to work through that and realize that it's better that you know this information than not. Anyway, don't need to go hang, till we meet again. Love you, mean it.